Hi.
Hi.
Again.
Didn't need to know that.
Sorry.
This is an original take.
So...
Kate Bornstein, my gender workbook.
Okay.
Cautionary interlude.
Cautionary literature.
I said interlude.
Okay.
Anyway.
I'm just teasing you. Yeah, so this is the piece that we're going to focus on. I know it's the one I really wanted to do because I had such a, personal reaction to it, and it inspired, such a mix of, feelings in me that I really wanted to talk about it and examine it and stuff like that, so.
It also touched me in a personal way, and, it goes to, how well it explains, the negativity of gender and gendered feelings. And I think that's the one thing that separates cis and trans people is the inherent ennui that happens, because going back to another reading that we've had of Riki and how she explains certain appetites being fulfilled, I guess I kind of have an appetite of being female, it's in that it's just a natural inclination, I just feel it and I have to have it, and it really goes into explaining the horrors that can be faced as being trans, and I think that's very important because I know that I've had very difficult times explaining the facets of trans feeling, and for example, the picture itself is brilliant.
Let me flip to it. Obviously he has a copy of it, but...
Yeah, and it just goes really well, the really weird face, just disproportionate and ghoulish, and the hands, and it just all feels wrong and elongated.
Yeah, and everything is too something. Everything is too long, too short, too big, too wide, too small. I think I said too small, but yeah.
And it really just goes down to having a bad body day, just having a bad hair day. That is just
And I think for me it goes beyond oh, I don't like the way I look, how some people have those days where they're oh, I kind of feel fat, or those sorts of days. It's so clearly the way she captures it is it's just completely wrong.
And that's why the picture and these beginning first, the beginning of the poem for me is the thing that was most touching, because it explains exactly my inherent feelings about joking about myself about gorilla arms, just beating myself up, being too long, too flat, playing with smoke and mirrors, when I'm not smoke and mirrors, my identity is not smoke and mirrors, but to achieve that in terms of society makes me feel that way, because I'm constantly aware of my broad shoulders and my brow bone and things like that, and I'm constantly thinking, how can I hide that? Which is...
Yeah. I mean, it's distracting. It's if you constantly have those sorts of thoughts in your mind, how can you possibly think about other things? I mean, it just crowds out other things, I think. These sorts of thoughts. And it's funny because when we were talking earlier, I mean, you were talking about how this is gender dysphoria, essentially, this is her capturing gender dysphoria, and how I didn't immediately think of this as gender dysphoria, and I thought that was interesting. I don't know, just to comment on. I thought, because the times where I've gone, oh, that's gender dysphoria, it's always been really extreme cases, well, I won't go into it, but so, and to realize that this, I don't know, it's something I didn't have a name for before, and since you named it, it's nice to know that this is also that.
Yeah, and this is what I've really been facing with, not the same kind of extreme bouts that you've been having for the most case. It's just been constantly this entirely.
Yeah.
But anyways, what was your favorite part of this?
I think my favorite part was, the bit where she's talking about the angels, the three angel jokes, where the first time she goes in and the cowboy says, "What makes you think we can tell ourselves apart?" And the second time is, "It matters who we're talking to, so we pay attention." And then the last one is, the guy pulls out a gun and blows the angel away. "Don't ask those questions around here," he says to her. "We don't like those questions around here." And I don't know that I have words to put to it as to why I liked it so much or why it mattered so much to me, but I guess for me, it represents different places in my life. Like, there are places where I can walk in and I can ask those sorts of questions, and it's accepted, and it's funny. The people are like, "Oh, yeah, it is funny. We don't really know how to tell ourselves apart. Oh, yeah, it's kind of silly that we have this, like, whole gendered system." And then there are other places where it's like, well, it matters to me, and that's why it is. And it's less comfortable, and the joke is less funny the second time, It's more uncomfortable here. And then there are places in my life where I would not dare ask those sorts of questions. I would not question the system. I would not point it out, because there are consequences. I'm not going to say that I would get shot, but I'm saying there are very real consequences for asking those sorts of questions. And I think it's important to remember that, because we sit here in classrooms and we ask these questions and we all have each other to bounce off of, and it's a very accepting environment, and we forget that there are places where you just can't ask those questions without facing some really uncomfortable or even dangerous situations.
Yeah, I guess I kind of lose that. I don't really have like that fear of, but I haven't had like a reaction that's like strictly against me being so open-minded. I haven't had like one person like shoot me down. So I guess that's my life experience of just being like,
I don't want to say that someone would like literally shoot me down, but I mean, I've had situations where when I've tried to talk about this, like I specifically think about trying to talk about it with my mom. The first times I started to realize that it was something concretely different. And how she would kind of metaphorically shoot me down, like, "Oh, it's not a problem. You're not that. Don't worry about that. You're not that." So that sort of things is like being erased, being, yourself being made to not be, essentially, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was my favorite part, I think, because I don't know. A lot of people, I think, come from more accepting environments than I have in the past, and I think my environment is improving slowly, so I will admit that, but there have definitely been points in my life where it's not been okay to ask questions, and I think people don't always have to deal with that. I don't know, so that's why I really liked it.
Yeah, I never really had to deal with it, but, like, at the same time, you always are aware, like,
That's true.
It does speak to, like, you have to pay attention.
Yeah.
And so it makes the personal political.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And that's one. I think that's one really big thing that like it touches about like the systematic oppression, like how we're just like how we have to constantly be aware of like everything, and I think that's why we have like such great feelings of loneliness, the trans community, is because I know, for instance, like I just can't understand the cis mentality. Like I just like don't get it, and there's just like a rift.
Yeah.
Like I just have like this grand curiosity of just like, what does it feel like to not have like any of these gender feelings, to have been like be able to be inherently dulled the entire time, because I was a part of this non-questioning of the culture, but there was still that inherent part of me that like ticked and ticked and ticked, and like, what if that didn't exist? Like I just can't imagine it, and I
don't think I would be me, to be honest. I would have to be someone completely different. I don't think I could exist as myself without asking those questions, personally.
I was somebody else, but it was all a performance at the same time, which was amazing.
It's and so, I don't know, just to touch on it, just because it's a thought that I've had. I don't know, because you use the term trans community, and a lot of times I relate to what you're saying, and yet I feel like I'm not allowed to identify with that label, because it's not like, I don't seek to change my body, I don't seek to do anything of that, and yet I feel like in some ways I do experience similar things. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I guess it goes back to the whole, like, gender transgressiveness.
Yeah, well, let's stick to this for a second.
Yeah, I know. that does play into it.
I think so, yeah, because I'll wait till I get to there to talk about the things that are on my mind. Back to the systemic oppression. I love it, but, you know, because she's going on about it, and she's saying, you know,
Mm-hmm.
who isn't oppressed for some reason, you know, who isn't other, and angry about it. And I'm glad that she acknowledges that, because it's true. I mean, we are built on a society of others, you know, of alienation, and but I don't know. She put words to something I hadn't really been able to voice before. The fact that the triggers are very unique to gender, like she says, gender outlaws, because of how pervasive it is in the culture. Because everything is fucking gendered. Like,
I mean, and that's the thing is, like, I had so many triggers, like, while I was, like, in youth, like, even just, like, the concept of wearing a pink shirt, like, sent a frenzy of discussion in my mind. Like, I had, like, month-long debates to myself about, like, the color of pink and, like, a t-shirt I'm wearing it. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense.
I think that goes along with masculinity, because I mean, it's proven essentially that there's less room for experimentation as far as masculinity, because masculinity is a very narrow concept. And I think I had a slightly different experience in childhood, because, you know, when I was in kindergarten, I had really, really freaking long hair, and then in first grade I asked my mom to chop it all off, and I actually picked out like a boy's haircut out of the boys' book, and I just really wanted it. My mom thought, oh, that's adorable, she's a tomboy, I'll let her do it. And so I did. I had hair about this length when I was in first grade, and it was kind of cute, you know, like, with girls it's seen as cute, you know, it's like, oh, she thinks she's a boy, you know. So, or, you know, oh, she's I don't know.
I was always
different.
I was always able to project myself to be masculine enough that nobody really asked
questioned.
At least in the family, not in elementary school. It didn't work out that way. You know, but at the same time, I was able to avoid masculinity that I didn't want pressed on me, so I found this weird middle ground where I was still really discontent.
You were negotiating it, yeah.
I just played society's game.
You know, and I was just thinking, like, had I been male and had these feelings that I had in childhood, I think I probably would have grown up and identified as trans. But I think because I was born female, and there is a certain permissiveness that goes along with being female, I think that's why I've had more room to be what I am, and it not be quite as uncomfortable, just because I think there's not as, well, I don't want to say there's not as much gender policing, because there was a lot, but I think there's more spaces for females outside of, you know, the rigid definition of femininity.
Well, I think at the same time, there's a little bit of difference between not wanting to be bounded by wanting to be a gender
outlaw, totally,
and having that inherent urge to say, this is not happening, like when you first grow breasts, just like the common trans male experience is just to be like utterly revolted and disgusted by it.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I felt those feelings when I was
I think I was confused. I don't know that I would have identified my feelings as revolted. I didn't understand.
I mean, like, that's the thing for me, is when I was 12, I mean, this is all anecdotal, but
yeah, no, this is relevant.
But, like, my father was describing puberty to me, and, like, it was just, it made me violently sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
And just, like, the whole world, like, was a crisis, but at the same time, like, I was going to become more masculine and more accepted by, like, society. I'd gain more white male privilege, you know, and maybe I could just, like, avoid more bullying in the future by, like, just being, like, the regular guy in the background who nobody knows about, instead of just, like, the feminine, awkward boy. But at the same time, like, I was just so disgusted by everything he told me about puberty, and just thinking that I was going to become like my dad, and I just, like, had to take advantage of my voice while I had because you know how kids can, like, make a really high-pitched scream.
Yeah.
No matter whether you're male or female.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds the same.
But males lose that. So, like, I had to just scream. I said to scream just to be like, I have this right now.
Yeah.
And it's gonna go away because, you know, I didn't have any access, but I still inherently felt like I had to scream like a female because, like,
and that's what you
holding
had.
on to it.
What you had. I think, as far as, like, talking about just, you know, puberty and reactions to it, I think mine was more apathetic. I was like, I don't know, but the reason I know that that's weird is because my sister was really invested in it. she was all excited. She was like, oh my god, I'm gonna grow boobs. Oh my god, I'm gonna get my period. Oh my god, she was excited. Whereas I was like, I could do without that. I could do without boobs. I could do without periods. I could. So I don't know that I would describe mine as revulsion, but that's interesting. I don't know. Sorry, I hadn't even thought about that before. But back to the idea that they're like very unique triggers. I mean, like you were saying, like what cisgendered individual would be revulsed at the idea of puberty, like?
Just like most times, like you want to be a chip from the old block, and like look up to your dad. Like I looked up to my dad, like in some ways, but I was certainly always disgusted about like him as a male person with like, just the hair and the lack of curves and just the square angles.
Yeah.
Like.
And like you were saying earlier, how do you describe that to a cis person? How do you It's not something. I mean, you could tell someone that, but it's never something that they're gonna really ever really be able to identify with. Because I don't know. I just find it interesting. We should probably head to being transgressively gendered.
Yeah.
That got off topic, but oh well. In one part, I'll just read the section. It says, my rage comes in part, I'm thinking from having been told, you're not our kind, so many times, in so many places, by so many people. It's why I want to see transgendered mean transgressively gendered. That way we can all belong to the same team if we want to. And I think this goes back to the whole idea of what is, kind of like what is cis and what is trans.
Yeah.
Because it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Because by no means would I say that I don't feel right identifying as transgendered. Because I don't feel that that's right. I mean, I'm genderqueer.
But at the same time,
I'm not cisgendered.
If you accept trans with the little asterisk mark after it, you've seen that on Tumblr, haven't you?
I have seen it, but I don't really understand it.
It means that encompasses all trans identities in terms of being transgressively gendered. In terms that the transgender itself is an umbrella term that does encompass genderqueer.
I haven't
for me.
I haven't
my
heard
conception of the labels. You're genderqueer. I'm transsexual. We're both transgender.
Okay, I could see that.
But I mean, there's a whole debate about and within the trans community, there's like there's deep queer politics involved, of course, always. So.
It's funny because I had never heard that before. I never have heard it conceptualized as an umbrella term. So, I don't know. That's interesting. That's something that I've been struggling with a lot in this class is where do I fit? Because I know I'm not cis. Because I look at this cisgendered experience and I'm like, that's not mine. Like I don't. Yeah. It's just so clearly not mine. Because my sister's like textbook cisgendered. And it's not even like, oh, I'm just a weird female, or oh, I'm just a weird girl. It's like, no, I'm just not that. Like
you're trans girl.
Okay.
You're transgressing gender.
That's
transgressing gender. But that's my problem, and I guess that's Kate Bornstein's problem. It's and it's like we have this back and forth about labels.
Yeah.
And there is credence to transgressively gendered people ganging up and being like, we have a home. We have our reverse dysphoria or dysphoria. Oh God. Now we can't think of the word.
It's dysphoria, diaspora?
Diaspora.
Something like that.
Diaspora.
Diaspora. There we go.
And like we are an effective block, but at the same time, I feel like nobody's transgressively gendered. Like every gendered experience is legitimate and is not a transgression. It's a journey itself, for my opinion.
Yeah, because I think it goes back to your argument of, fuck the system, essentially. Like, why do we need labels? Whereas I think transgressively gender has a place if you accept the binary. Which I think Kate Bornstein kind of does. When I've heard her talk, She accepts that it's there at the very
I
least.
think she plays it the same way I do by humoring it so that there's common linkage between
true.
people, because like whenever you actually step into the real world of stepping outside of the non-binary, it gets weird for people.
Oh god, yeah.
You can totally be non-binary, but you still have to unfortunately speak in binary terms,
Yeah.
which goes back to the systematic oppression.
Yeah, to the idea of reinforcing a system by, like you say, humoring it. It's such a catch-22. Because, I mean, you want to be able to communicate your experiences effectively, because if you can't, then what's the fucking point, you know? But we need a different language. That's what I've decided. We need a different language for this.
Done with English.
Just done with English.
Done with English.
We're good at French.
Done with this video.
I think we are, yeah.
So,
any final thoughts?
Vive le français, I guess.
Vive le français.
I don't know, that has some really gendered stuff too. We have to like...
I was going to say the language itself is inherently
new
gendered.
language.
Esperanto. To the internet.
New gender neutral Esperanto.
Esperanto is gender neutral.
Oh snap.
You can make it gender neutral, yeah. They actually built it into the language that you could make it gender neutral if you need to.
That's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
I enjoy that. So we'll go look that up.
In conclusion,
Esperanto is the way to go.
Esperanto. That's what we've learned today, Brian. So,
bye.
bye.